Welcome back to Bargirl Baddies. Today's story is a bit different from what we usually cover here. Most of the time, we're talking about guys who got played, scammed, had their hearts and wallets empty by someone who saw them as nothing more than a walking ATM. But what happens when the script flips? What happens when a scammer, someone whose entire existence is built on manipulation, on reading marks, on keeping emotions locked away like they're contraband, actually catches feelings? What happens when the person running the con falls in love with the target? That's the story we're diving into today. It comes from a guy named Jake, 28 years old, from Vancouver, Canada, software developer, quiet guy, the kind who keeps his head down, does his work, doesn't make waves. And he came to Thailand the way a lot of guys do, broken, burnt out, looking for something he couldn't even name. He thought he'd found it in a bargirl named Milk. And maybe he did. But so did she. And that, as it turns out, was her rookie mistake. Before we get into it, do me a favour, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from, and if you've ever been caught in that weird space between being used and being genuinely cared for. If you've ever wondered whether someone's feelings were real, even when their actions weren't, hit that subscribe button, because this one's going to make you think. Alright, let's get into Jake's story. I'm not going to pretend I came to Thailand for some noble reason. I didn't come here to find myself or have some eat, pray, love awakening. I came here because I was tired. Tired of Vancouver. Tired of the rain. Tired of waking up in a 400 square foot studio that cost me $2,000 a month and looking out at the same grey sky and feeling absolutely nothing. My girlfriend, ex-girlfriend, had been cheating on me for 6 months before she finally told me. 6 months. We were living together. I was talking about buying a place, maybe getting a dog. And the whole time, she was seeing some guy from her gym. She didn't even seem that sorry about it. She just said she'd been unhappy for a while and didn't know how to tell me, like I was some kind of obstacle she'd finally worked up the courage to move past. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just moved my stuff out over a weekend and crashed on my buddy's couch. Went back to work on Monday like nothing happened. My boss asked if I was okay, and I said yeah, just tired, which was true. I was tired. I'd been tired for a long time. Work didn't help. I was doing back-end development for a fintech startup that kept pivoting every 3 months. We'd build something, scrap it, build something else. 14-hour days. Meetings about meetings. A CEO who talked about changing the world, but mostly just changed his vacation destination. I was making decent money, but I had nothing to spend it on. No relationship, no hobbies, just work and sleep, and this creeping feeling that I'd worked my entire 20s away for nothing. So I started scrolling. YouTube videos of guys living in Chiang Mai for $30 a day, expat forums full of people talking about freedom and low cost of living and how the weather alone could fix you. I knew it was bullshit mostly. I knew these guys were running from something just like I was. But the idea of being somewhere warm, somewhere cheap, somewhere I could just exist without the weight of expectations, it started to feel less like a fantasy and more like a plan. I quit my job on a Tuesday. Gave 2 weeks' notice. My boss looked relieved. I think he knew I'd been checked out for months. I sold most of my stuff, put the rest in storage, and bought a one-way ticket to Bangkok. My mom cried when I told her. My dad just said, "Be careful out there." My buddy asked if I was having a midlife crisis. I said probably. He laughed. I didn't. I landed in Bangkok on a Thursday night in late April, and the heat hit me like a wall. Thick, wet, unrelenting. I took a taxi to Khao San Road because that's where everyone said to go first. The driver didn't speak English, and I didn't speak Thai, and we just sat in traffic for an hour while I stared out the window at the neon, and the motorbikes, and the street vendors grilling meat on these tiny charcoal grills that looked like they'd tip over if you breathed on them wrong. The hostel smelled like cigarette smoke and fried rice. My room was the size of a closet. The air conditioner rattled like it was dying. I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling and thought, what the hell am I doing here? But I also felt something I hadn't felt in months. I felt awake. I spent 2 weeks in Bangkok doing the tourist thing. Temples, markets, street food that made me sweat through my shirt. I met other travellers in hostels, gap year kids from Europe. Australians on working holidays. A couple of American guys in their 50s who'd retired early and were seeing Asia on the cheap. Everyone had a story. Everyone was running from something or toward something or just running. One of the Australians told me to check out Pattaya. Said the beach was better, the the cost of living was lower, and it was less chaotic than Bangkok. He didn't mention what Pattaya was actually known for. Or maybe he did, and I just wasn't paying attention. I took a bus down and got a room in a guest house off Second Road. The beach wasn't better. It was grey and crowded, and the water looked like it hadn't been clean in decades. But the rent was cheap, and the food was cheaper, and I could walk to the beach in 10 minutes. I figured I'd stay a month, maybe 2. I fell into a routine. I'd wake up late, work on some freelance coding projects to keep money coming in, hit the gym, grab lunch at a Thai place where the lady behind the counter started recognizing me and giving me extra rice without asking. In the evenings, I'd walk. Just walk. Down Beach Road. Through the night markets. Past the bars with girls out front calling to every foreign guy who passed. I wasn't interested. Or I told myself I wasn't. I'd heard the stories. I wasn't naive. But there was something hypnotic about it. All the lights, the music, the sheer brazenness of it. It felt like a different planet. I found a bar about 3 weeks in. It wasn't on Walking Street. It was tucked down a side soy, a smaller place with a pool table and a handful of older expats who looked like they'd been there for years. The music was quieter. The girls were older, less aggressive. It felt less like a carnival and more like a neighbourhood pub that just happened to have bar girls working there. That's where I met Milk. She was behind the bar the first time I saw her. Mid-20s, I guessed. Small, thin, with long dark hair she kept in a ponytail. She wasn't wearing the usual uniform, the short skirt and the bikini top, just jeans and a black tank top. She was pouring drinks and wiping down the bar, and she didn't look at me once. Not when I walked in, not when I ordered a beer, not when I sat there for an hour nursing it and watching the expats play pool. That's what got me, honestly. The fact that she didn't care. I came back the next night. Same thing. She was polite when I ordered. She smiles when I paid. But she didn't linger. She didn't ask where I was from, or how long I'd been in Thailand, or if I wanted company. She just worked. The third night, the bar was almost empty. Just me and one old British guy in the corner reading a newspaper. Milk was wiping down tables. I was on my second beer and feeling just brave enough to say something. "You always this quiet?" I asked. She looked up, smiled a little. "Depends on the night." "Slow night," I said. She shrugged. "Slow week." We didn't talk much after that, but it felt like something, a crack in the wall. I started going to that bar almost every night. Not because I was trying to hook up, I just liked the vibe. And I liked that Milk didn't treat me like a customer. She treated me like a regular. She'd remember what I drank. She'd ask if I'd eaten. Small stuff, normal stuff. One night, maybe a week later, I stayed until closing. The British guy had left. The other girl working had gone home. It was just me and Milk. She was counting the register, and I was finishing my beer. And she asked, out of nowhere, "Why do you always look so sad?" I laughed. "Do I?" "Yeah," she said, "like something's broken." I didn't know what to say to that. So I just told her the truth. About Vancouver. About my ex. About the job I hated and the life I'd walked away from. I told her I didn't know what I was doing in Thailand. I just knew I couldn't be there anymore. She listened. Really listened. And when I finished, she told me about her village in Isan. About her grandmother who raised her because her parents were gone dead or gone, she didn't specify. About a boyfriend who promised to marry her and take her to Bangkok and then disappeared with money she borrowed from a loan shark. About working in Pattaya because it was the only place she could make enough to pay it back. She didn't say it like she was looking for sympathy. She said it like she was just stating facts. We started meeting outside the bar after that coffee shops during the day. Night markets where she'd haggle with vendors in Thai and get me things for half the price I would have paid. A temple on the hill where she lit incense and prayed, and I stood there awkwardly, not sure what to do with my hands. She taught me Thai phrases. Hello. Thank you. How much? I'm full. She laughed every time I mispronounced something, which was always. I made her laugh a lot, actually. I didn't think I was funny, but she did. The physical stuff came later. A month, maybe. We were sitting on Jomtien Beach at night, away from the crowds, just watching the water. She leaned her head on my shoulder. I put my arm around her. And it felt easy, natural, like we'd done it 100 times before. When we finally slept together, it wasn't transactional. It wasn't fast or mechanical. It was slow. She looked at me like she was seeing me, not just going through motions. Afterward, she stayed. She didn't check her phone, she didn't get dressed and leave. She just lay there with her head on my chest and traced patterns on my skin with her finger. I knew the rules. I wasn't stupid. I'd been in Thailand long enough to understand how things worked. But Milk felt different. She never asked me for money outright. She never played the sick buffalo game. When her motorbike broke down and she mentioned it in passing, I offered to help. She said no. I offered again. She said no again. The third time, she said okay, but only if I let her pay me back. She never did, but the fact that she said it mattered. I was falling for her. I knew it was probably a mistake, but for the first time in over a year, I felt something other than numb. I felt awake. I felt seen. One night on Jomtien Beach, she rested her head on my shoulder and said, in halting English, "I wish I meet you before." Before what? I asked. She didn't answer, just squeezed my hand. I didn't push it. I didn't want to know, because in that moment, sitting there with her in the warm night air, I felt like maybe I'd found the thing I'd come to Thailand looking for. Not a place, not an escape, just a person who saw me and didn't look away. I should have known better, but I didn't. And honestly, I'm not sure I would have done anything differently. The thing about comfort is that it makes you lazy, not physically lazy, mentally lazy. You stop asking questions because you don't want to hear the answers. You ignore the small inconsistencies because addressing them means shattering the illusion you've built. And I'd built a pretty good illusion with Milk. For a while, it held. The first crack came about 2 months in. We were sitting at a noodle shop near her apartment and her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned, then flipped it face down on the table. I asked if everything was okay. She said yeah, just her friend being dramatic. I didn't think much of it. Everyone's got drama. But then it kept happening. We'd be mid-conversation and her phone would light up and she'd silence it without even looking. Or she'd step outside to take a call and come back quieter, distracted. When I asked who it was, she'd say work or family or some vague non-answer that technically wasn't a lie, but wasn't really the truth either. The money requests started small. 2,000 baht here, 3,000 there. Her grandmother needed medicine. Her brother crashed his truck and needed to fix it, or he'd lose his job. Her phone screen was shattered and she couldn't afford a new one. Every request came with an apology and a promise to pay me back. I gave it willingly. It felt like what couples did. You help each other, you don't keep score. Except I was keeping score, even though I told myself I wasn't. And the numbers were starting to add up. She started cancelling plans, not often at first, just once in a while. She'd say she was tired or not feeling well or had to help a friend with something. I'd offer to come over anyway, just to hang out. She'd say no, she didn't want me to see her looking rough. It was sweet, almost. The idea that she cared what I thought, but the cancellations became more frequent. And when we did see each other, she seemed somewhere else, physically there, but mentally checked out. She'd smile when I talked, but I could tell she wasn't really listening. Her phone would buzz and she'd tense up, just slightly, before ignoring it. I told myself it was stress. She was working a lot. She had family stuff. Everyone goes through phases, but deep down, in the part of my brain I was actively trying to ignore, I knew, and I didn't want to know. One night I showed up at her apartment unannounced. I'd picked up Thai food from the place she liked and thought I'd surprise her. It was around 8. She told me earlier she wasn't feeling well and was staying in. I knocked, no answer. I knocked again. I could hear movement inside. Then the door opened and there she was, full makeup, hair done, wearing a dress I'd never seen before. She looked beautiful and guilty and surprised all at once. "Oh," she said. "Jake, hi." I held up the bag of food. "Thought I'd bring dinner." She glanced behind her, then back at me. "That's sweet. But I'm actually just leaving. I thought you weren't feeling well." "I'm feeling better. I'm meeting a friend." I didn't ask which friend. I didn't ask why she was dressed like she was going on a date. I just nodded and said, "Okay, have fun." She kissed me on the cheek, took the bag of food, said thank you, and closed the door. I stood in the hallway for a solid minute, just staring at the peeling paint on the doorframe. I believed her because I wanted to, or I pretended to believe her, which amounted to the same thing. The collapse came via Facebook message, which is about as undignified as it gets. I was sitting in a cafe working on a freelance project when the message came through. The guy's name was Derek. Profile picture showed a man in his 50s, sunburned, wearing a Hawaiian shirt. Australian, based on the slang in his message. "Hey mate," the message read. "Don't mean to be a downer, but thought you should know. You seeing a girl named Milk? Works at a bar off Soy 8. My stomach dropped. I typed back, "Yeah, why?" His response came fast. "Been sending her money for 8 months. Saw a photo she posted of you two. Thought you might want to know you're not the only one." I stared at the screen. My hands were shaking. I asked how he knew. He said he didn't, not for sure, but he'd been doing this long enough to recognize the pattern. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even hurt, really. He just sounded tired. Resigned. "Look," he wrote. "I know there are others. I'm not stupid. But I saw your face in that photo and you looked happy. Thought maybe you didn't know. If you did, no worries. If you didn't, well, now you do." I asked if he knew how many others there were. He said he didn't. But there was a condo she was renting in Bangkok that none of them had ever seen. She'd mentioned it once on a call and then pretended she hadn't. I thanked him. I don't know why. What do you say to the other guy in a situation like that? He sent back a thumbs up emoji and that was it. I sat there for an hour. Didn't move, didn't touch my laptop, just sat there feeling like the floor had opened up underneath me. I didn't want to confront her. Confrontation meant making it real. But I also couldn't just let it go. So that night, I went to the bar. She was working. She smiled when she saw me, came over, kissed me on the cheek like nothing was wrong. I waited until her shift ended. We walked to the beach. It was late, almost no one around. The water was black and the air was thick and I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. "I need to ask you something," I said. She looked at me. "Okay, how many of us are there?" She didn't ask what I meant. She didn't play dumb. She just stopped walking and stared out at the water. For a long time, she didn't say anything. Then, quietly, she said, 4, maybe 5. I felt like I'd been punched. Even though I'd known. Even though Derek had told me, hearing her say it out loud was different. I waited for her to cry, to apologize, to try to explain it away. She didn't. She just stood there, arms crossed, looking small and tired and done. "Were any of them real?" I asked. "Or was it all just business?" She turned to look at me then. Her eyes were dry, but there was something in them I hadn't seen before. Something raw. "You were different," she said. Her voice cracked. "You were the one I wanted to keep." I didn't know if I believed her. I still don't. But the way she said it, the way her voice broke on the word keep, made me think that maybe she believed it. And maybe that was worse. I didn't yell. I didn't call her names. I just said, "I can't do this," and walked away. She didn't follow me. I went back to my apartment and sat on the balcony and felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness. Just this vast, hollow nothing. I'd been so careful. I'd told myself I was smarter than the other guys. I'd seen the red flags and convinced myself they didn't apply to me because Milk was different. We were different. But we weren't. I was just another name on a list. The money was gone. I knew that. Maybe 15,000 that total. Not life-ruining, but not nothing either. I didn't ask for it back. What was the point? I didn't block her number. I thought about it. But I didn't. 2 weeks went by. I barely left my apartment. I worked. I ordered food. I stared at the ceiling. My mum called, and I told her everything was fine. My buddy from Vancouver messaged asking how Paradise was treating me. I sent back a thumbs up. Then, at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday, someone knocked on my door. I knew who it was before I opened it. Milk stood there in sweatpants and an oversized t-shirt, no makeup, eyes red and swollen. She'd been crying, not the delicate kind of crying. The ugly, snotty, hyperventilating kind. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry. I should have closed the door. I should have told her to leave." But I didn't. I just stepped aside and let her in. She sat on my couch and cried for 10 minutes straight. I didn't comfort her. I just sat there and waited. When she finally stopped, she told me everything. The real version. Not the sanitized story she'd fed me before. The loan shark debt was real. 60,000 baht. She'd borrowed it 3 years ago to help her uncle buy a truck for his business. The uncle never paid her back. The loan shark didn't care. The interest compounded every month, and now she owed almost double. The bar wasn't enough to cover it. So she started seeing customers outside of work, not sleeping with all of them, mostly just talking, playing the girlfriend, getting money sent via Line or Western Union. She had a system. She'd meet them, make them feel special, let them think they were different. Then she'd milk it for as long as she could before they caught on or got bored or ran out of money. She said she'd done it so many times it stopped feeling like lying. It was just work, just survival. But then she met me. I didn't ask for anything, she said. You just talked to me. Like I was normal. She said she'd tried to keep it professional, tried to see me as just another customer. But I kept coming back, and I kept being nice, and I never pressured her for anything. And eventually she stopped pretending. I fell in love with you, she said, and it ruined everything. She told me love made her sloppy. She forgot to cover her tracks. She posted photos without thinking. She cancelled on other guys to see me. She stopped answering messages because she didn't want to lie to me anymore, but she couldn't tell me the truth either, because the truth meant losing me. I don't know how to be loved without lying, she said. It's all I know. We sat there in silence for a long time. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to feel betrayed, but mostly I just felt sad. Sad for her, sad for me, sad for the whole stupid situation. I asked if she was still seeing the others. She said yes. She said she didn't know how to stop. The debt was still there. The loan shark was still calling. Her family was still depending on her. I didn't take her back. I need to be clear about that. I didn't tell her it was okay or that we could work through it, but I also didn't kick her out. We sat on my balcony and talked until the sky started turning pink. She told me things I don't think she told anyone, about the uncle who controlled her money, about the customers who got rough, about the exhaustion of performing all the time, of being whoever someone needed her to be. I told her about Vancouver, about the numbness, about running away from a life I built because I didn't know how to fix it, about coming to Thailand thinking I'd find something real and realizing too late that I'd just traded one illusion for another. When the sun came up, she left. We didn't hug. We didn't make promises. She just said thank you for listening, and I said take care of yourself. I never saw her again. She stopped answering my messages after that. I'd send one every few days just to check in. They'd go unread. After a couple weeks, I stopped trying. I left Pattaya about a month later. Not in a rush, not out of heartbreak. I was just ready. I went up to Chiang Mai, then over to Vietnam, then back to Bangkok. I kept moving because staying still meant thinking, and thinking meant replaying everything and wondering what I could have done differently. The truth is, I don't know what happened to Milk. Maybe she's still working that bar. Maybe she finally paid off the debt. Maybe she found some guy who didn't care about the lies. I hope she got out. I'm not naive enough to believe she did. What I realized eventually is that I didn't come to Thailand to find love. I came to feel something after a year of feeling nothing, and Milk gave me that. She made me feel seen. She made me feel wanted. Even if it was wrapped up in lies and survival and desperation, it was still real in its own broken way. And I think I gave her something too. A moment where she didn't have to perform, where she could just be tired and scared and honest. Maybe that doesn't count for much, but it counted for something. Welcome back. That was Jake's story. And I know what some of you are thinking. He got played. He was naive. He should have known better. And yeah, maybe. But here's the thing. Life isn't a morality play where everyone fits neatly into categories of victim and villain. Sometimes the person scamming you is just as trapped as you are. Sometimes empathy and exploitation live in the same space. Sometimes you can be used and still cared for. Those things can coexist. Jake didn't get his money back. He didn't get closure. He didn't get the Hollywood ending where Milk reforms and they ride off into the sunset. But he got something maybe more valuable. He got to see someone as a whole person, not just a transaction. And she got to be seen, even if only for a moment. I'm not saying what Milk did was okay. Lying is lying. Manipulation is manipulation. But understanding why someone does something doesn't mean excusing it. It just means being human enough to recognize that hurt people hurt people. And sometimes the person hurting you is drowning too. If you've been in a situation like Jake's, if you've ever been caught between anger and compassion, if you've ever wondered whether someone's feelings were real even when their actions weren't, drop a comment. Let's talk about it. And if this story made you think, hit that like button and subscribe, because the truth is never as simple as we want it to be. Jake's back in Canada now. Different city, different job. He says he's doing okay. He doesn't regret going to Thailand. He doesn't even regret milk. He just wishes he'd understood sooner that sometimes the person falling for the con is the one running it, and sometimes the rookie mistake isn't falling in love. It's thinking love will save you. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.